Philadelphia in the 1940s wasn't a city. It was a jungle with windows. Cops were bought, corners were taxed, and silence wasn't just golden, it was survival. At the heart of it all, long before people whispered Bruno's name with half fear and half respect, there was Joseph Ida. The man who didn't yell, didn't posture, didn't beg for respect. He just was it. People called him the Quiet Don. Not because he was shy, but because he made his point without ever needing to raise his voice. But silence is a funny thing. You can hide things in it. Secrets, regret, screams that only come out when the city sleeps. And Joseph? He hadn't slept right in years. Even in his calmest moments, behind his tailored suits, that dark combed hair, the quiet dinners in South Philly, there was a tremor underneath. Every night at exactly 2:13 a.m., Joseph would sit up, sweating like he just came out of a meat locker. His wife Carmela had stopped asking years ago. She knew the routine. He'd wake, whisper names under his breath, and light a cigarette with shaky hands. She never asked whose names. She didn't want to know. Truth was, Joseph was hearing voices, and they were all dead. It started in 1946, the year he made his biggest move, when he took out Carlo "Carly Boy" Santoro. Carly Boy was loud, flashy, disrespectful, and worst of all, ambitious. The kind of guy who wanted to skip the line. And Joseph, quiet or not, didn't tolerate disloyalty. They found Carly Boy's body floating in the Schuylkill River 3 days after he'd gone missing. Hands bound, mouth taped, 2 slugs in the gut, and 1 in the back of the head. The message was clear. Ambition without permission gets you drowned. But Joseph didn't sleep that night, or the next. The first dream came soft, like a whisper. He was walking down Passyunk Avenue alone at night. The streets were empty. All the lights out. Every store closed. Then came the sound, slosh, slosh, slosh. Wet footsteps behind him. He turned. Carly Boy, soaked. Eyes open but clouded. Mouth moving but no words. Just bubbles. Joseph tried to speak, but his mouth wouldn't work. Couldn't scream. Couldn't run. And then he woke up, soaked in sweat, gasping, 13 a.m. every damn night. The guys thought he was just being cautious. Boss don't sleep much, they'd say. He's got eyes everywhere. That's how he stays alive. They didn't know the truth. Joseph couldn't sleep. 'Cause when he did, the past came crawling, and the thing about being a Don, you bury a lot of people. Enemies, snitches, traitors, sometimes even friends. They all had names. They all had faces, and in his dreams, none of them stayed buried. Joseph tried everything. Whiskey, doctors, women, priests. One priest told him, "What you do in the dark, Joseph, the night remembers." He never went back to that church again. By 1950, Joseph Ida was running all of Philly. Numbers, unions, protection, heroin, gambling, all under his calm, calculating control. But his mind, that was chaos. Each hit, each betrayal, each order etched another face into his nightmares. And the worst part, some nights, he didn't even feel guilty. Some nights he missed it. The violence, the rush, the godlike power of deciding who lives and who vanishes. But that's when the dreams got louder. The voices became screams. The sleep got shorter. One cold November morning, Joseph sat alone in the kitchen, staring at his hands, shaking, barely able to light his cigarette. The paper in front of him had the headline, "Gangland Execution in West Philly, No Suspects," his own doing. But it didn't even hit him anymore. No thrill, no pride, just numbness. That's when Carmela finally spoke. First time in months. Quiet, barely a whisper. "Are you even alive anymore, Joe?" He looked at her. For once he didn't have an answer. But inside he was thinking the same thing. The night after Carmela asked him if he was even alive anymore, Joseph didn't answer her. He just sat there, motionless, like a statue left behind in a war zone. The coffee in his cup had gone cold. His cigarette burned all the way down to the filter without him even taking a drag. He wanted to answer her. Something. Anything. But the truth was that question hit too deep, too real.
Are you even alive anymore, Joe?
The question wasn't about breath or blood. It was about the soul. And if Joseph Ida was being honest with himself, he hadn't felt alive since the day he put Carly Boy under the water and didn't blink. Sleep came that night, but not like most nights. Usually it started with shadows, fog, the murmurs of dead men he ordered gone. But this time was different. This time he saw himself. Not the man he was now. Not the Don, not the suit and the rings and the bodyguards.
No, he saw younger Joe, back before the name meant something. Back when he was just a corner kid from South 10th Street.
A nobody. Running numbers, pushing favors, handing off envelopes with shaking hands and eager eyes. The dream, young Joe was sitting at the end of the table, wide-eyed, listening to old man Sabella, his mentor, the Don before him, talk about how to rule with silence. Loud men die quick, Joey. Real power doesn't need to shout. It whispers. And when you whisper, the smart ones listen. Sabella had taught him the game. But Sabella didn't teach him how to live with the weight of the crown. Joseph woke up from that dream cold, breath caught in his throat, hand reaching for a pistol he kept under the pillow, just in case someone came for him while he was defenseless. But the room was empty, quiet. Carmela was gone.
Must have slept in the other room again.
Couldn't blame her. The clock said 2:13 a.m., same damn time. Every damn night. He dragged himself out of bed, walked into the bathroom, and looked at himself in the mirror. The man who stared back didn't look like a king. He looked like a corpse that hadn't been buried yet. The bags under his eyes were so dark they looked bruised. His skin had lost its colour. His hair, once thick and black, had thinned out into little strands combed carefully to cover the cracks. Joseph Ida wasn't dying. He was fading. But even fading men have empires to run. That morning, he had a sit-down with Frankie the Mink Mazzarelli, one of his captains running the dockside unions. Frankie was young, eager, and dangerous. The kind of guy Joseph used to be. Frankie had that look in his eyes, ambition bubbling under the surface like lava waiting to burst. "Boss," Frankie said, lighting a cigarette with a shaky hand. "We got a problem. The Gianetti crew's been skimming off the heroin shipments.
Couple ounces missing every time.
They think we ain't noticing, but I got a guy watching 'em." Joseph didn't even blink. "Who's the guy?" "Ricky, kid from South Street." Joseph nodded.
A kid? Yeah, but he's scared.
"Said they made threats. Wants to walk away?" "No," Joseph said flat. "No one walks away. You start something, you finish it."
You understand me?
Frankie nodded, but Joseph saw it. That flicker of disagreement. That itch behind the eye that said you ain't the only boss in this room anymore. He'd seen it before. First in Carly Boy, then in others.
Men who forgot who made them.
Men who thought the crown could be passed like a cigar across the table. Frankie didn't know yet, but his time was ticking. Later that week, Joseph was at church.
Not to pray.
Not anymore. He hadn't prayed since 1949. He just went to sit in the back, in the silence, in the smell of candles and old wood. Something about it felt like the only place left in the world where he could think without hearing the screaming. But on that day, something strange happened. A kid, a skinny altar boy, maybe 16, approached him quietly. Sat down 2 pews away. Joseph ignored him. But then the boy spoke, eyes forward, not looking at him. "You're the man who had my uncle killed," he said, like he was talking about the weather. Joseph didn't move. "Who's your uncle?" The kid still didn't look at him. Giuseppe Cataldi, that name. That was a deep cut. Giuseppe Cataldi was a soldier, low level but loyal. until he got drunk one night and ran his mouth to a Fed in a bar in Jersey. Joseph had him disappeared within 48 hours, left his body in the trunk of a car parked 2 blocks from the courthouse. Joseph looked at the kid. He looked so much like Giuseppe it was eerie. Same nose, same eyes, same rage simmering under the skin. "You should leave this alone, kid," Joseph said. The boy stood up slowly, smoothed out his shirt,
and walked out of the church. Joseph didn't sleep that night. The dreams changed again. Now he saw the kid,
standing at the edge of his bed,
not moving,
just staring. His face didn't change. His lips didn't move. But Joseph felt something in the air.
Judgment,
A curse, maybe.
a warning that not all ghosts come from the past.
Some are from the future. Joseph began locking his bedroom door after that. Like it mattered. Carmela started avoiding him altogether. She cooked for him still. She still kept up the image of a traditional mob wife, polished, loyal, tight-lipped. But she wouldn't sit with him, wouldn't touch him, wouldn't even sleep in the same bed. He tried once.
Tried to pull her close, whispered in her ear like he used to. "I'm still me, Calm. I'm just tired." She looked at him with eyes full of quiet fury. "No, Joe, you're not tired."
"You're hollow." And then she walked away. And he didn't stop her, because deep down she was right. One night, Joseph was called to the docks.
One of the Union trucks had been hijacked.
2 of Frankie's guys were shot.
Frankie was there, pacing, angry, wired like a live wire. "They hit us hard, boss. Real clean, real fast. Someone tipped him off." Joseph just stared at the blood on the pavement. Still warm, still fresh.
One of the dead men, Tony Veschio, was only 22. Still had braces on his teeth. Still had dreams. He looked like his own son would have looked if Carmela hadn't miscarried back in 42. Frankie was barking orders,
Making calls.
getting loud. Joseph walked up to him, slow and cold. "Keep your voice down," he said. Frankie turned, all attitude. "What, you scared they'll hear us?" "We got rats, Joe. I got a clean house." Joseph didn't blink. "You clean nothing without my say." Frankie stepped closer. "You getting soft? 'Cause if you are, I'll take care of it." It hung in the air like poison. Joseph smiled. 2 days later, Frankie's body was found behind a seafood restaurant in Camden. No blood, no bullet holes, just 2 broken arms, a shattered jaw, and a bag over his head. Message sent. No one challenged Joseph again, but that night, the dream came back. Not just Carly Boy,
Not just Giuseppe. Now Frankie too.
his jaw twisted.
Arms bending wrong.
All of them standing together in a dark, wet alley, watching him, not speaking, just watching, and behind them, more were coming. By now, Joseph had stopped pretending he could fix any of it. He just played the part. The Don, the man with the plan, the guy in control. But inside, his mind was a burning building. Every night he walked its halls, rooms full of screaming, laughter, accusations. And some rooms he didn't dare open, but the worst part, the silence, the unbearable silence of the dead, looking back at him without a word. They didn't want revenge. They didn't want apologies. They just wanted to be remembered. One morning, Joseph sat at his kitchen table, scribbling names on a napkin.
Not orders.
Not deals. Just names. Carly Boy, Giuseppe, Tony, Frankie.
And more. Dozens. He lit the napkin on fire and let it burn in the ashtray. Carmela watched him from the hallway, silently. "You write in confessions?"
She asked. Joseph didn't look up. "Just reminders." "Reminders of what?" "That I used to be someone worth something."
"Before I started becoming this." She said nothing, but she didn't walk away this time.
The first time Joseph saw the shadow in broad daylight, he thought he was losing his mind. It was a Wednesday afternoon, clear sky, crisp fall breeze, the kind of day Carmela used to beg him to take walks on, back when things felt human. Joseph had just left a meeting with a mid-level supplier near Broad Street. The deal was about heroin, the Mexican pipeline, a new route through Newark that would need greasing. He should have been thinking about numbers, shipments, and who needed to be paid off, but instead, as he stepped out onto the street and adjusted his coat, he saw it. Across the road, standing between two rusted dumpsters behind an old bakery, was a figure.
Not a man, a silhouette.
A tall, narrow shape, with no face, no colour, just darkness. Still, watching, Joseph blinked, looked again. Gone, his heart pounded, not from fear, exactly.
From recognition.
That same cold whisper he felt in his dreams had stepped into his day. And it wasn't waiting until 2:13 a.m. anymore. The nightmares were bleeding into daylight now. A thin line between memory and hallucination. And Joseph didn't know when he'd crossed it. That night, he couldn't sleep at all. He just lay there, eyes open, breathing shallow, waiting for the usual pattern to strike. But nothing came.
No dream, no dead men.
Just silence so thick it felt like drowning in cotton. Until 4:06 a.m., when he heard footsteps. Not in the house. In the hallway inside his dream. He was standing in the upstairs hallway of his old family home, the one he grew up in before the suits, before the power. The floor creaked beneath him, and the wallpaper was peeling, yellowed from years of cigarette smoke and secrets. Down at the end of the hallway stood his mother, dead 20 years, but her face wasn't right. It was too smooth, like a wax statue melting slowly under hot lights. She spoke with a voice that wasn't hers.
How many more, Joseph? How many more before you sleep for good?
He tried to speak, but his jaw locked up. Then the doors on both sides of the hallway began to open.
One by one.
Behind each door, a face he knew.
Many ordered dead.
Women he betrayed.
Kids caught in the crossfire.
All staring, silent, waiting. He turned to run and found himself in his own bed, gasping for air, drenched in sweat. 6 a.m., a new time, a worse time. That morning, he cancelled all his meetings, even the ones he never cancelled, union bosses, port enforcers, his capos. He told Sal the driver to bring him upstate to his hunting cabin near Scranton, somewhere quiet. Somewhere out of the city's reach. Sal said nothing, just nodded and opened the back door like always. But Joseph noticed something. Sal didn't look at him the same anymore. The same way Carmela didn't, the same way the crew didn't. They all saw it. The slip, the crack in the dawn and cracks in this world. They don't stay hidden for long. They got to the cabin just after 1 p.m. Joseph told Sal to head back to Philly.
I'll call when I need you, he said. Sal hesitated.
You sure, boss? You want me to stay nearby? Joseph stared at him. Are you asking if I can handle being alone? No, sir. Just being cautious? Joseph smirked. Caution comes too late in this life. Then he closed the door. The cabin was exactly how he remembered it. Cold. Still. Nothing but the sound of wind through pines and the occasional creak of wood as the place settled. He made coffee.
Sat on the porch.
Watched the trees. Tried to think of nothing, but nothing didn't come. Instead, thoughts poured in. Faces, deals, the betrayal that started it all. There was one name he never wrote on the napkin. One ghost he refused to face. A name burned into his brain like a scar he couldn't cover up. Pietro Costa. They were friends once, closer than blood, grew up in the same streets, fought the same street fights, chased the same girls, broke into the same liquor store when they were 15, and then Joseph climbed higher, made connections. Suore Omertà became Sabella's shadow. Pietro didn't want that life at first. He had dreams of a small bar, a wife, maybe a dog. Quiet things, but poverty poisons dreams. Eventually, Pietro came to Joseph, needing help.
A favour. A door opened.
Joseph gave him a job. A small job pushing numbers for the north side. Then one day, Pietro got greedy. A side deal with Jersey Cruise, skimming off the books. thinking Joseph would let it slide because of their past. He was wrong, and Joseph, back then, didn't blink. Loyalty over friendship. Business over heart. Always, he gave the order. Told Carmine to make it clean.
No blood on the streets, but something went wrong.
Pietro's body wasn't found for 3 days. When a fisherman spotted it snagged in the rocks up in the Delaware River, his face was gone. Birds had taken pieces. His fingers were snapped. Joseph never forgave Carmine for botching it, but he never punished him either, because part of him knew it was himself he wanted to punish. Pietro's name had never been spoken since. But now
he heard it every day.
In the wind, in the birdsong, in the silence between breaths. And as the sun began to set behind the trees, Joseph felt something shift. The light got colder, the trees stopped swaying. Everything went still. He stood up, heart thudding, and then he saw him at the edge of the woods, just barely out of the fading light.
A figure in a dark coat, standing watching. Joseph stepped off the porch, slowly. "Pietro?"
he said. No answer. He took another step forward, and the figure disappeared behind the trees. Joseph ran. Branches slapped his face. Roots caught at his shoes. But he didn't care. He chased that shadow like a dying man chasing his soul. "Pietro!" he shouted. "Where are you?" The woods didn't answer. But somewhere deep within them he thought he heard something. A laugh, not joyful.
Not angry, just
disappointed. He collapsed by a creek, chest heaving, knees soaked in mud. The darkness settled around him like a thick curtain. And then he saw it. On a tree across from him, a name carved into the bark. Pietro Costa. Underneath it, scratched like it was done with a knife, were the words, "You never said sorry." Joseph Ida, the Don of Philadelphia, buried his face in his hands and wept. Not for power, not for control, but for something he couldn't name. Something human. Something broken long ago and never repaired. He didn't sleep that night, didn't even try. He sat on the porch with his pistol, eyes fixed on the tree line, waiting for something.
a sign, a voice, a shot. But nothing came. Only the wind, only the wait. By the time he returned to Philly 2 days later, something in him had changed.
He was colder, yes, but also quieter. Not the confident quiet he was known for. This quiet was empty. Like a cathedral no one prayed in any more. The crews noticed. They asked fewer questions, moved more carefully. Carmela didn't speak a word when he walked in the house. She just stared. Then, for the first time in years, she touched his hand. He didn't pull away. She whispered, "You look like you've seen your own funeral." Joseph just said, "Maybe I did." But the city, it doesn't pause for your grief. That week, one of his lieutenants, Rocco Two-Step Ferraro, got arrested in a DEA sting. Drugs, weapons, RICO charges, and Rocco was already making noise about cutting a deal. Joseph called an emergency meeting at the social club in South Philly.
All his top guys. The room was tense.
Cigarette smoke hung in the air like a funeral shroud. Joseph walked in last, as always. But this time, no one stood. That was new. He sat at the head of the table and looked at them.
All men he made. Men who owed him their rise.
But in their eyes he saw it. Doubt, waiting, a shark's hunger. He leaned forward, voice low. "If Rocco talks, we all burn." So he's got to go. No one nodded, no one disagreed, but no one moved either. He said again, he's got to go. Still silence. Finally, Benny the Chin cleared his throat. "You sure that's the move, boss?"
Eyes are on him. Feds, news, everybody. Joseph stared him down.
Better a bullet now than a cage tomorrow. Benny hesitated, then nodded. I'll make it happen. Joseph sat back, but the whisper in his head wasn't done. You're losing them. Joseph Ida sat alone in the club long after everyone else had gone. The tables still held the aftermath of the sit-down, half-smoked cigars, empty espresso cups, ash scattered like snow over a world built on silence. But the men who once filled this room with respect and obedience had left behind something heavier than ash. Doubt. It was in the way Benny the Chin questioned him, the way nobody jumped to follow orders, the way they avoided his eyes. Even the smallest hesitation from a man like Joseph Ida could crack the foundation of power. He was slipping, and they all smelled it like blood in the water. He lit a cigarette, hands shaking just enough to annoy him. His nerves were no longer steel. The dreams, the ghosts, the visions, they were eating away at him like termites in a wooden throne. And deep down, he knew what was coming. Someone wanted his seat. He just didn't know who yet. The next morning, Joseph was woken by a sharp knock at the front door. It wasn't usual. People didn't just knock on Joseph Ida's door. Carmela stood in the hallway, robe wrapped tight, already tense. "You expecting someone?" she asked. He shook his head. "No." He reached for the .38 he kept tucked under the drawer by the stairs, walked slowly to the door. When he opened it, there stood Mario DeFalco.
A low-level guy from South Street who usually handled collections and cleanup. "Sorry."
"Boss, I wouldn't come here if it wasn't urgent." Joseph stepped aside, waved him in. "Talk." Mario looked like he hadn't slept either. "It's Rocco," he said. "He's gone." "Gone where?" "Gone, boss."
He skipped.
Slipped his tail. "We checked his apartment, his sisters, his cousins."
He vanished. Joseph blinked slowly like it took effort to process. "And the hit?"
Mario hesitated. "Never happened." Benny didn't pull it. That stopped everything. Joseph stood very still, his hand tightening around the gun, still at his side. His voice dropped to a whisper. Benny defied a direct order. Mario looked nervous now.
I think Benny's playing cautious.
He's got guys whispering in his ear that you're not
all there anymore." Joseph stepped closer. "And do you believe that, Mario?"
The younger man swallowed hard. "No, boss."
"I don't. But Joseph saw it."
The flicker. The one that always betrayed a man's true thoughts. It was there. The fear, yes, but under that, pity. Pity was the last thing Joseph Ida could afford. Later that day, Joseph called Carmine Messina, one of the oldest men in the crew, a relic from Sabella's days. Trusted, feared, unshakable. Carmine walked into the club like it was 1940 again. Wool coat, fedora, and the same cold eyes he used when digging shallow graves. Joseph didn't bother with small talk. Find Rocco. Quietly. If Benny gets in your way, remove him too. Carmine raised an eyebrow.
"You sure this isn't just heat from the dreams again?"
Joseph's eyes narrowed. What'd you say?
"I mean the stuff I've been hearing."
That you ain't been sleeping? That you're seeing things? Joseph stepped in close.
"I see exactly what's in front of me, Carmine."
You do the job or I'll find someone who will. Carmine stared at him a long second, then gave a slow nod. All right, boss. I'll clean it up. But Joseph didn't feel safe, not with Carmine, not with Mario, not with anyone. So he started keeping records. He'd never done it before. Too dangerous. Paper was weakness. But now, something in his gut told him he'd need to leave behind a record. If not for the law, then for the truth. He began writing in a small, leather-bound notebook hidden inside a vent in his study.
Not names, not locations.
Just sins, what he'd done, who he'd done it to, and who was now walking around like they hadn't bathed in blood, just like him. He wrote about Pietro Costa, He wrote about Carly Boy, about the priest he silenced, about the time he let a whole family burn because someone said the father had talked to the feds. He wrote things no man should ever admit, not even to God, and after every entry he wrote the same sentence: I do not regret it, but I do not sleep. That night, sleep finally came. But it wasn't a dream, it was a warning. He was standing in the middle of the club, lights flickering, the room empty, chairs turned over, tables burned black. Then he heard a voice, not one of the dead, not Pietro, not Carly Boy. This was Carmine. In the dream, Carmine stood behind him and said, "They're coming, Joe, not for your soul, for your crown." Joseph turned, but Carmine was gone. Then from the shadows, Benny stepped out. His face was burned, twisted. He raised a knife, and Joseph woke up, screaming, "Yigan 13 a.m. again." He didn't wait for morning. He called Silvio Marchesi, his oldest friend left alive and the only one who still looked at him with respect.
Not calculation. Silvio showed up in 20 minutes. Joseph didn't mince words. "Someone's making moves. I want you to find out who." Silvio looked tired, like all of them did these days. "It's Benny," he said.
He's been cozying up to Carmine too, whispering about how the family needs fresh blood. Joseph nodded slowly. "Does Carmine believe him?" Silvio shook his head.
"I don't know.
"But I do know this. If you don't act fast, someone else will." The next day, word came in from Newark. Rocco had been found. Not by Joseph's men. By the feds. He was in protective custody, already talking, already handing over names, already describing Joseph Ida's empire piece by piece, and worst of all, he was naming Carmine and Benny as key figures. It was over. Joseph knew that, but if it was over, he'd be the one to end it, not the government.
Not the betrayal.
Not in a cold courtroom with flashing cameras and handcuffs. No, he would end it on his own terms. He called for a final sit-down. Everyone. Take capos, lieutenants, enforcers, even Carmine and Benny. He picked the oldest safe house in North Philly, abandoned for years. No wires, no eyes, just one room, one table.
And the ghosts in his head. They all arrived late at night.
Tension thick, guns in jackets, fake smiles. Carmine acted casual, but Joseph saw the twitch in his jaw. Benny was sweating, his eyes jumping from face to face. Joseph stood. "Before anything else," he said, "I need to know who's loyal. Not to me, to the family." No one moved. Then Benny spoke. "With all due respect, boss, the family needs strength, certainty. Some of the guys," he looked around, "they're worried you ain't the same man you used to be." Joseph smiled. "Good." He pulled a small pistol from his coat and shot.
Benny in the throat. One shot. No hesitation. Benny collapsed.
Choking on blood, everyone else jumped back.
Hands on guns, but no one fired. Carmine looked stunned. Joseph stepped over Benny's twitching body. Gun still warm. Anybody else feeling worried?
Silence. Then Carmine stepped forward.
"You shouldn't have done that." Joseph raised the gun again. "I should have done it weeks ago." Carmine stared at him, chest rising.
But he didn't reach for his gun. He knew. They all knew. The quiet dawn had roared again. That night, Joseph sat alone in the warehouse after everyone left. Benny's body already removed. Carmine alive, for now. The power was his again, but it didn't feel like power anymore. It felt like prison. That night, the dream returned. Not Carly Boy, not Pietro, not the priest, not even Benny. It was Joseph himself, sitting across from him. Smiling, he said, "You finally remembered who you are." Joseph nodded, and the dream version of himself leaned in and whispered, "Now finish it before they finish you." The morning after, Benny bled out on the concrete floor. The streets of South Philly were quiet, but not with peace. It was the kind of silence that follows thunder. Everyone knew what had happened at the warehouse. Word always got out, no matter how tight you kept things. You couldn't kill a man like Benny the Chin Ferraro without waking up the city. No cops showed up, no sirens.
No headlines, just whispers, Ida snapped. Benny made a move and got buried for it. The quiet Don isn't so quiet anymore, but none of them said it out loud.
Because in Philly, silence wasn't just respect, it was survival. Still, Joseph knew the shot wasn't the end. Benny was only the beginning. He stood in front of his bathroom mirror, same as always, but the face looking back wasn't the same. There were more lines, more weight under the eyes.
He didn't look tired anymore. He looked haunted, not by fear.
By history. He touched his chin, stared hard, and said out loud to no one, "You're not done yet." Carmela watched him dress in silence. Black suit, black tie, dark wool coat. She'd watched him wear that same outfit to countless wakes, meetings, funerals, most of which he had personally caused. He finally broke the silence. "I need to see someone." "Another captain?"
No, he said. Her? Carmela narrowed her eyes. Her? Who?
Joseph looked down at his cufflinks, adjusting them slowly like it gave him time. Pietro Costa's daughter. The name hit Carmela like a slap.
Her eyes widened. Joseph, she's just a kid. Not anymore. You think that's a good idea? Showing your face to someone whose father you had killed? He looked up at her. Calm, cold. I need to see her eyes.
"Need to know what's in them?" Carmela turned away, arms folded, her voice sharper now. "She won't give you peace."
If that's what you're looking for. He walked toward the door.
"I'm not looking for peace. I'm looking for the truth." Her name was Lucia Costa. Last Joseph had heard. She was working at a small bookstore in South Philadelphia. Kept out of trouble and kept out of headlines. Raised by her aunt after Pietro vanished. She never married, never got involved in street life. Everyone said she was clean, but clean didn't mean untouched. He had Silvio drive him, but stay in the car. He didn't want muscle, didn't want intimidation. He wanted answers, clarity, or maybe just closure. The bookstore was small, quiet, tucked between a barber shop and a corner deli. Joseph walked in slow. The bell above the door jingled like a warning. She was behind the counter, reading a paperback. Lucia looked up, and in an instant she knew exactly who he was. Her face didn't flinch. Her hands didn't shake. She just stared at him like someone staring into a fire they'd been expecting for years. Joseph spoke first. "Lucia." "Mr. Ida," she said flatly. "You're late."
20 years late, I came to speak.
"Just speak," she nodded slowly.
I don't want to know what happened to him. I've lived this long without needing the details. I'm not here to confess, he said.
"I just wanted to see the eyes of the only person left that might still curse my name." She closed her book and placed it gently on the counter. "You want to know if I hate you?" she asked. "Yes, I did," she said. "For a long time."
I dreamed about slitting your throat in front of your family. Joseph said nothing. She continued. But I didn't become like you. That's what saved me. Hate didn't make me strong. It made me tired.
"Just like it made you." His face twitched. "You don't know me," he said. "No," she replied.
But I know what you did.
"And I know what you became because of it." Joseph exhaled through his nose. The air in the store felt thick, heavy with the weight of what wasn't being said. He leaned forward slightly, lowered his voice. "If I told you I've seen him every night for 20 years, would that make a difference?" Lucia didn't blink. "No," she said.
It's because he doesn't visit me anymore.
"He's yours now." He left the store without another word.
No apology.
No explanation. Just walked out into the cold street and got in the car. Silvio didn't ask how it went. He didn't need to. That night, Joseph sat in his study, staring at the flames in the fireplace. Carmela had gone to bed without saying good night. Again. And the whiskey in his glass wasn't doing its job anymore. He opened the notebook, wrote another line. I am the gravekeeper now.
I do not mourn. I remember. Then he flipped to the first page and started crossing names off. The next phase was cleaning house, not out of paranoia, out of necessity. He couldn't go to jail.
Couldn't go out in a hospital bed surrounded by federal agents. Couldn't die with handcuffs on. If it was going to end, it would end on his terms. But first, the leaks. The next day, he called Silvio to the study. I want a list. Everyone who's been seen talking to out-of-town crews. Jersey, New York, even Baltimore.
I want to know who's auditioning for the throne. Silvio hesitated. You sure you want to do this, Joe?
Joseph lit a cigarette. Every king dies, but not every king chooses when, Silvio nodded. All right, I'll bring you names by the end of the week. Joseph looked him dead in the eye. And Silvio? Yeah, if I'm on that list. You bring it to me anyway. By Wednesday, the list was on his desk, 12 names. Half of them he'd raised from street rats to shot callers. One of them had once called him Uncle Joe. Another had carried his daughter's coffin when she died at 6 years old from pneumonia. A man Joseph once trusted with everything. He didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't cry. He just circled 6 names in red and lit the rest of the list on fire. That week, South Philly turned bloody one by one. The 6 men Joseph marked vanished. One poisoned at his own dinner table. Another shot dead in his mistress's apartment. 2 disappeared entirely, just gone. The last 2, their bodies were dumped together in the Delaware River, tied together with barbed wire like garbage. No police arrests. No press releases, just a message. The Don still had fangs, but it wasn't about fear anymore. It was closure, a cold finality. Every move Joseph made now felt like the sealing of a tomb. His tomb. Then, one night,
a different dream came. Not a nightmare, not screaming, just Pietro.
Sitting in that same chair, across from him. He looked calm. Clean. Like he did when they were boys, sneaking smokes on rooftops, dreaming of stealing the world. Pietro smiled. You almost done? Joseph nodded. Yeah, you ready? Not yet. Then stop acting like you are, Pietro said.
Clean your blood.
But don't let it drown you. He woke up with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. He got dressed. Not in black this time. Grey suit, light tie. Same fedora from the old days. He even shaved. He walked out into the living room, and Carmela stood there, frozen, staring at him like he was a ghost. Where are you going? She asked. Joseph smiled. Out. To breathe. But as he reached for the door, Carmela said something that stopped him cold. Joe.
They're coming, he turned. What?
2 nights ago I heard a phone call.
From the study. One of your own. One of the 6 you didn't circle. Joseph's smile faded. Who?
She walked to the window, didn't turn around. Mario, the kid from South Street. Joseph felt his pulse rise, slow but heavy.
Mario, the one who told him about Rocco. The one who looked at him with pity. It was never about being ambitious. It was about waiting.
Waiting for the old lion to collapse. Joseph stepped back into the house and reached for the revolver in his desk drawer. The last time Joseph Ida had truly trusted someone, it got Pietro Costa dumped in the Delaware River and left Joseph staring at ceilings for the next 20 years, haunted by every face that had vanished under his orders.
That kind of guilt didn't just haunt you, it hunted you.
You'd feel it in your joints.
In your stomach.
In your sleep. In your shadow. But betrayal? That was a different thing entirely. Betrayal wasn't just pain. It was personal. It meant someone had watched you bleed for them and still decided you were better off dead. And Mario, that little street punk who once cried on Joseph's shoes after he botched a numbers job in 52, was about to find out what that meant. Carmela didn't say much after she told him. Just stood there, staring out the window like she expected a hail of bullets at any moment. She'd known the rules for years. No emotion, no warning, no second chances, but even for Carmela, this was too close to home. "You should leave town," she said softly. Joseph shook his head.
"It's my house, and they're coming to bury you in it." He loaded the revolver anyway.
6 shots, clean, no scratches. The kind of gun you use when you want to finish things yourself. He slipped it into the back of his waistband, under his jacket. Not because he expected to use it, but because he knew he would. He didn't call Silvio. He didn't call anyone. This wasn't going to be one of those messes the crew cleaned up after Sunday Mass. This was going to be personal, the way things used to be, before phones and lawyers and backroom sit-downs. He was going to look Mario in the face. And whatever came after that, came. Joseph parked 2 blocks down from Mario's spot, a little social club front they used to launder money through poker games and sports betting. Joseph had helped them buy the building 20 years ago when Mario was still too young to tie his tie straight. Now it was his. Joseph walked slow, steady, a man in his own funeral procession. The streets were quiet, too quiet. A bad sign. He stepped into the alley behind the club. Toward the back door, it was unlocked. Worse sign. The place smelled like cheap beer and cigar smoke, but there was something under that, something
Sharp. Tension. A chemical in the
air that smelled like violence. He heard a chair scrape, a
voice. "Look what the cat dragged."
In, Mario stood at the end of the hallway.
Alone, at least at first glance.
He looked older than Joseph remembered.
Harder around the edges.
Not scared anymore. Joseph's voice was ice.
"You forgot who built you?" Mario gave a dry laugh.
"No, I remember. But you stopped building a long time ago. You just sit on the ruins and act like they're castles." Joseph stepped forward. "You ran your mouth to outsiders. Only because you stopped listening to your own men. That's not a reason."
"That's a mistake." Mario pulled a pistol from his coat and held it low, not aiming it.
"Not yet." Joseph didn't flinch. "You gonna shoot me, Mario?" Mario didn't answer. Instead, from the shadows, 2 more men stepped out. One of them was Leo Morone, another rat Joseph had once called nephew, not by blood, but by bond. The other was Carmine. Joseph blinked. "Carmine, of all people. You?" Joseph asked. Carmine stepped forward, arms crossed, voice gruff. "You lost it, Joe. You lost control." Benny was proof. "These streets need order again." "I built that order," Joseph said. "And then you slept through it," Carmine snapped. For a second, no one moved. 4 men in a hallway made for 3.
Only one of them still acting like a king. Then Joseph spoke again. "You all finished talking."
Leo smirked. "Why?"
"You got something to say before you join the rest of your ghosts?"
Joseph took a deep breath, then calmly pulled his revolver and shot Leo between the eyes. Everything happened fast after that. Carmine lunged forward, reaching for his own piece. Joseph turned and shot again. This one grazed Carmine's neck, spinning him back into the wall with a groan. Mario fired. The bullet tore through Joseph's left shoulder. The pain lit up his nerves like fire. But Joseph didn't fall. He advanced. Another shot from Mario missed wide. Joseph lifted his arm with sheer will and put a bullet straight through Mario's gut. The kid fell, gasping, blood pooling fast under him. Joseph staggered.
Knees weak, vision shaking, shoulder dripping. But he was still standing. The only one. Again. He leaned against the wall.
Breathing heavy, gun trembling in his hand. Carmine groaned from the floor, blood leaking from his neck. Not fatal. Not yet. Joseph stepped toward him. "You made your choice." Carmine tried to speak, but only gurgled. Joseph looked down at him. Face unreadable, then raised the gun again and pulled the trigger. Click. Empty. He dropped the gun, let it clatter on the floor, and walked out. The alley was darker than when he arrived, the air colder. He walked 3 blocks before collapsing against a dumpster, the blood from his shoulders soaking into his coat. His body shook. Pain crawled up his arm and into his chest like ice. People passed.
Him, didn't look, didn't ask, just another.
Bleeding man in Philly, nobody worth saving, but...
Then a car pulled up. Silvio, he must have been watching, he
jumped out and rushed to Joseph. Jesus, Joe, what the hell did you do? Joseph's voice was weak. Clean the rot. Silvio helped him into the back seat. You're lucky you're not dead. Joseph closed his eyes. I'm already dead.
I'm just choosing where the body drops. He woke up in Silvio's apartment, a needle in his arm, bandages on his shoulder, Carmela sitting beside him.
Silent, holding his hand like it was the last real thing in the world. Joseph looked at her. Still here?
I've always been here, she whispered. I'm sorry, he said. For what? Oh, for making you live with a man who died 20 years ago. She kissed his forehead.
Then maybe now you can come back. But Joseph knew he wouldn't, not really. The ghosts were still there, just quieter now. He had one last job to do. He sat at the desk later that night, opened the notebook, flipped through the names. So many names, then wrote one last entry. The throne is made of bones. Let whoever sits next remember that. He closed the book, stood up and called Silvio. I'm done, he said. You sure? Yeah, the city's yours. Don't screw it up. Silvio was silent for a moment, then, thank you, Joe, for keeping it breathing this long. Joseph hung up, and for the first time in years, he slept, dreamless, silent, peaceful. The next morning, the sun hit differently. It poured in through the blinds like liquid gold, soft and warm. Not the harsh, suspicious light Joseph Ida had grown used to. For the first time in decades, he didn't wake up gasping, soaked in sweat, clawing at invisible enemies in the dark.
He simply opened his eyes, alive, still. His shoulder throbbed from the bullet Mario put in him.
The bandages were stiff with dried blood, and his body was sore from head to toe. But he didn't care. He welcomed the pain. Pain meant you were still here. Pain meant it wasn't over yet. He sat up slowly in Silvio's guest room. The walls were bare, the air stale. A small TV in the corner hummed static from a channel that had long gone off air. Carmela was gone, probably stepped out to make calls or get coffee, but her presence lingered. There was a blanket folded neatly at the edge of the bed, a glass of water on the nightstand, an untouched bowl of soup. She still cared. Even after all of it, after the deaths, the silence, the years of sleeping in separate beds and talking through looks instead of words, she stayed. He reached for the water, took a long sip, and stared at the floor. The world hadn't changed overnight, but he had. Silvio walked in a little after 9, coat over his arm, tie loosened, the usual cigarette tucked behind his ear. He looked relieved when he saw Joseph sitting up. Thought I'd walk in and find you gone, he said. Joseph smirked.
Gone where? Hell don't want me.
And heaven's out of business in South Philly, Silvio chuckled, sat down on the edge of the bed. City's talking.
Words out. Mario's dead.
Leo's dead.
Carmine's
still breathing, but barely. The old guard's either buried or back in line. Joseph nodded. Good. You sure you want out? Silvio asked. You cleaned house.
There's still fear in your name.
You could rebuild? Joseph looked at him, eyes tired but sharp. Fear ain't the same as respect.
And rebuilding just means more blood. I'm done. Silvio didn't argue.
He just nodded. You want me to finish what you started? Joseph raised an eyebrow. You think you can?
I know I can, Silvio said.
But I'll do it quiet.
Like you taught me, Joseph smiled.
Then you already know how not to end up like me. He didn't go back to the mansion on Broad Street. He gave it to Carmela. Let her decide what to do with it. Sell it, burn it, turn it into a church for the damned. He didn't care. Instead, he moved into a small apartment near the Italian market. Nothing fancy, just 2 rooms and a balcony that overlooked the alleyways where his empire once thrived. There was no ceremony, no farewell tour, just a silent retreat. The city barely noticed, and that was the point. A king that stays too long becomes a target. Joseph. Ida had ruled long enough. Now he was just a man. The dreams didn't stop. Not completely, but they got quieter. He still saw Pietro sometimes, standing by the river, hands in his pockets, watching the water flow like time itself. He still heard Carly Boy's laugh echo down empty hallways. But it didn't paralyze him anymore. He could breathe through it. Sometimes he even talked back. One evening, as the city simmered with late summer heat, Joseph stood on his balcony, a glass of wine in one hand, the notebook in the other. He hadn't written in it for days. Didn't feel the need, but tonight felt final. He opened it, flipped to the last page, stared. At the last sentence he wrote, "The throne is made of bones." He underlined it once, then closed the book, walked inside and tossed it in the fireplace. The flames took it slow, licking the leather cover, curling the pages until they blackened and crumbled. He didn't watch it burn, just sat down and listened to the fire crackle like old men telling stories. He didn't need the book anymore. He'd written it on his soul. Carmela visited the next morning. She brought fresh bread,
Olive oil and a bag of tomatoes. Thought you might remember how to eat like a human being, she joked. Joseph laughed for the first time in weeks. She cooked.
He watched. They ate in silence for a few minutes before she finally said, "I don't know what to do with the house." "Sell it," Joseph said. "It was never really ours." She looked at him. "You think you can stay out? Really?" Joseph thought about it. Thought about the way the street still whispered his name. Thought about how every cop, every capo, every soldier still walked carefully around his memory. "I don't know," he admitted.
"But I'm going to try," Carmela nodded.
"Then I'll try too." The city moved on. It always did. Silvio took over quietly.
No big announcement. No bloody power grabs.
He absorbed the surviving factions, restructured the crews, shifted attention from drugs to real estate, from guns to influence. The new Philadelphia wasn't ruled by bullets. It was ruled by silence and paperwork. But Joseph still had eyes. He watched from the shadows, not interfering, just observing. Old habits don't die.
They just
get retired. A week after the house was sold, he got a letter in the mail, no return address, just a name on the front, Lucia Costa. He hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. He used to say you were the only one he trusted.
Even when you killed him, I think part of him still did.
"I don't forgive you, but I understand."
Keep him alive the only way you can.
"By being better than who you were." No signature, just that. He folded the letter and tucked it in his drawer. Didn't reply. Some ghosts you carry, some you honor. Weeks passed, then months. Joseph took to walking the streets early in the morning, before the shops opened, before the city pretended to be decent again. The people didn't recognize him anymore. The wrinkle of age had softened his face, and his name had become legend, untouchable.
Unspoken. Sometimes he'd pass corners where bodies used to drop. Sometimes.
He'd pass kids who reminded him of Pietro, and sometimes he'd hear whispers behind him and just
smile, let them wonder, let the ghosts
speak for him. He didn't need to anymore. One morning, he saw a kid getting hassled by 2 thugs on 9th Street. Low-level muscle.
Not even connected.
Just punks. Joseph stepped in. Didn't say a word, just gave them a look. The kind that came from decades of ruling with a stare. They backed off like animals recognizing a predator. The kid looked up at him, confused.
Thanks. Who are you?
Joseph smiled faintly. No one important. And he walked away. That night, he had another dream, but it wasn't like the others. There were no dead men, no guns, no rivers, just a kitchen table, a loaf of bread, a glass of wine. Pietro sitting across from
him, alive, smiling. They didn't speak. They
didn't need to. They just sat in peace, like it was 1935. Again, and nothing had gone wrong. Yet Joseph woke up with tears in his eyes, and he didn't feel ashamed. For once, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Peace, Joseph would come to learn, is a fragile thing. It doesn't come with crowns. It doesn't settle into your bones just because the bullets stop flying. It slips in like smoke through a cracked window, soft, quiet, temporary. And if you're not careful, if you so much as breathe the wrong way, it vanishes. He'd been out of the life for almost a year now. No meetings, no hits. No more whispered commands that decided who lived and who got wrapped in tarp and dropped into the Delaware. He woke up in his one-bedroom apartment with the sun on his face, a body that ached from age and old scars, and no responsibilities except feeding himself and occasionally pretending to enjoy small talk with the shop owners down on 9th Street. It was simple. He didn't trust it. That morning, he sat in the corner cafe with his espresso and newspaper, same as always. He wore a grey wool coat now, no longer the black sharkskin suit that had once marked him as a man to fear. But it didn't matter. In Philly, his name still lingered in corners like cigarette smoke. People didn't forget Joseph Eder. They just stopped saying his name out loud. Silvio had kept his promise. He ran things clean, quiet and calculated. He didn't leave bodies in alleys or ignite wars over territory. Instead, he modernized real estate, waste management, quiet government contracts, and union ties that didn't make headlines. Joseph never interfered. He never called. He never even stepped into the old club again. But one day, Silvio came to him, unannounced, which meant trouble. You ever hear of a kid named Enzo Ricci? Silvio asked, pouring himself a glass of wine from Joseph's dusty cabinet. Joseph didn't answer right away. He hated that name already. Silvio kept going. 27. Grew up around Port Richmond. Fast talker, louder than he should be, but got a following. You know the type? Joseph leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing.
The kind of kid who thinks blood makes you famous. Silvio nodded.
Exactly. His father was Vito Ricci, small-time guy, ran a gambling den back in the 80s, got popped, died in Greaterford. Joseph remembered Vito. A snake with a lip full of lies and hands that never stopped shaking. So what's the son want? He asked. Silvio took a slow sip.
He's making noise. Real noise.
Thinks the new era should be loud again. Wants turf. Wants headlines. Wants to paint the town red, Joseph scoffed. We painted it red for 50 years. Now we're just scrubbing the damn walls. Silvio hesitated.
He said your name? Joseph's face froze. What did he say? That you're nothing but a ghost now. That you're a relic.
He said he's going to take your legacy and burn it down to prove he's the real heir to Philly. Joseph said nothing, just stared at his drink. A flicker of something old lit behind his eyes. Not rage, not fear. Something worse. Recognition. He'd seen it before. In Carly Boy. In Benny. In a dozen others who thought you had to kill a king to wear the crown. 3 days later, someone painted a message on the door of Joseph's old social club. Ida is dead. It was signed with a bullet casing taped to the wood. The cops didn't ask questions. They knew better. Silvio had the message cleaned by noon, but it didn't go unnoticed, and Joseph didn't sleep that night. Not
because he was afraid of death. He'd welcomed death for years. But because this wasn't about him. This
was about what he built. Enzo Ricci had no respect. That much was clear. He was a street star, a loud-mouthed, gold chain-wearing punk who took Instagram pictures with pistols and called himself the Don of the new decade. He ran crews full of 20-somethings, with fast cars and faster mouths, no discipline, no structure, no code. He didn't understand the weight of the name he kept spitting through his teeth. Joseph had stayed quiet, stayed out of the picture, even when they buried Mario, even when Carmine disappeared quietly in hospice care, even when his own name became a story people told to scare rookies. But Enzo had crossed a line, not by insulting him, by forgetting who he was. One night, Silvio visited again. "You want me to handle it?" Joseph was silent for a while. Then, "No," Silvio raised an eyebrow.
"No?" Joseph sipped his wine. "I'll talk to him." Silvio nearly laughed.
"Joe, he doesn't talk. He posts, he flexes. He shoots. He's a snake without a leash." Joseph leaned in. "All the more reason it needs to come from me." Silvio studied him. "You sure you're up for it?" Joseph smiled faintly. "I'm not up for anything." "That's why it'll work." They met in a warehouse near Callow Hill, where Enzo's crew ran a stolen car ring. Joseph arrived in a borrowed sedan, dressed like a nobody, no guards.
No gun in his pocket, just a cane in his hand, and a stare that could still freeze blood. Enzo strutted in 10 minutes late, chains jingling, 2 bodyguards behind him.
Both kids. Joseph sat on a crate, didn't move, didn't stand, didn't blink. "You really came," Enzo said, smirking.
"I thought they were just sending your ghost." Joseph eyed him like one might a misbehaving child. "You're loud," Enzo laughed. "You're old." Joseph didn't react. "You think you can build something out of noise?"
he asked. "I think the silence of the past is what kept us in the gutter," Enzo snapped. "People want faces now."
"Not shadows." Joseph leaned forward, his voice sharp as broken glass. "People want power."
"Not clowns," Enzo's smirk faltered. Joseph kept going. "You think if they chant your name loud enough it makes you untouchable. But noise doesn't build empires. Fear does, loyalty does."
"Blood does." Enzo stepped closer, cocky but curious. "And what do you know about blood, old man?"
Joseph slowly pulled back his sleeve, revealing the scar from Mario's bullet, the wound still fresh enough to speak. "I bled to keep this city quiet." Enzo blinked. Joseph stood now.
"Tall despite his age. You want to be king? Fine. But you don't start by trying to kill the ghost who built the throne." Enzo's face hardened. "You came here to threaten me?"
Joseph smiled. "No, I came here to warn you." Silence filled the room like a loaded gun. "You keep playing at being a Don," Joseph said. "You'll end up just like the ones before you, with your face in the paper, your mother crying in court."
"And your friends ratting you out for a lighter sentence." Enzo said nothing. Joseph turned to leave, but before walking out,
he looked over his shoulder one last time. "Be careful whose grave you dig. Sometimes it's your own." That night, Joseph sat on his balcony with the stars above him and a quiet city beneath. He hadn't needed a gun, he hadn't needed to shout, and somehow the silence felt stronger than it ever had. But 2 nights later, the silence broke. A car exploded outside his apartment. No injuries, just a warning from Enzo, from someone else, didn't matter. The war had started again. The fireball outside his apartment shattered the windows and cracked the silence Joseph Ida had fought to preserve for nearly a year. The explosion shook the walls, knocked his only painting off the living room wall, and set off car alarms in every direction. His ears rang with the high-pitched whine of survival, something he hadn't felt in decades. He had been sitting in his chair, a cup of tea in one hand, a book in the other. The heat and sound hit him at the same time. He didn't flinch, didn't panic. Instead, Joseph Ida stood slowly, walked to the blown-out window, and looked down at the flaming wreckage of a sedan engulfed in smoke. A message. It was clear as blood on snow, not just to him, To the city, the quiet Don can bleed. The next day, the cops came around, poked at the ashes, asked some questions they already knew the answers to. They offered him protection, which Joseph refused without even lifting his eyes from his coffee. There was no report filed, no real investigation. Everyone knew what the explosion meant, and everyone knew why no one would talk. South Philly ran on a code, and the code had no sympathy for old men or new kings. Silvio showed up that afternoon. He paced the room, ignoring the broken glass under his shoes. It was Enzo, he said. It had to be. Joseph didn't argue. Of course it was. You warned him. He spit in your face. Joseph looked at the window frame, still smoking from the fire.
That's what kids do. He wants you dead. He's not going to stop until he buries your legacy. Then I'll make sure he doesn't live long enough to build one. Joseph knew what came next. Not war, not yet.
Wars require armies. What came first were whispers, the slow, sour erosion of loyalty. He began watching faces reading silences. The corner boys were nervous. The old captains were unreachable. Silvio held the center, but even he looked tired. You don't want to come back into this, Joe, Silvio said one night over wine. You're not a king anymore.
You're a ghost. Joseph didn't deny it.
That's exactly what makes me dangerous. The first counterstrike was simple. Vinnie Palmisano, one of Enzo's loudest lieutenants, was found shot 3 times in the chest in a tanning salon in South Jersey. No witnesses, no noise, just blood in the drain. Then Marco DeLuca, the loudmouth muscle who filmed himself waving an Uzi and calling Joseph a wrinkled old fossil, turned up in a dumpster behind a strip mall in Wilmington. Again, no cameras, no suspects, but everyone knew. Enzo got the message. The streets started watching again. But Enzo didn't back down. He went louder.
Hired new muscle from out of town, Albanians, Dominicans, guys with no history and no loyalty.
He started throwing money at the streets like it was confetti. Cars, drugs, girls, watches. He walked into restaurants and threw rolls of cash on the table like a king. Anyone still bowing to Ida, he said during one dinner, loud enough for everyone to hear. Might as well get measured. For their coffin, he posted it online. Hashtag.
All blood out, Joseph read it over his
morning coffee and smiled. Kids played at warm and finished it. He met with Silvio and the few loyal captains he had left in a small butcher shop basement off Tasker Street. No cameras, no phones. Just butcher paper on the walls and the smell of meat in the air. Joseph sat at the head of the table. He's trying to drag us into the spotlight, Joseph said. And the second we take that bait, we give the feds everything they need to tear the whole thing down. So what do? Asked Gino Ferreira, a trusted capo. Joseph sipped his espresso. We bury him the old way, quiet, smart, final. The plan took shape slowly. Enzo had 2 weaknesses, his ego and his routine. Every Friday, he held a private poker game at a luxury condo on Delaware Avenue. No cameras, no phones allowed inside. But every week, the same 6 guys, the same time, same security. Joseph smiled when he heard the details. Predictable. It was a Friday when it happened. Joseph didn't pull the trigger himself. He didn't need to, but he watched it happen. From a rooftop across the street, binoculars in hand, breath steady as stone. The black van pulled up at exactly 11:43 p.m. 4 masked men stepped out. Not a single word spoken. Security was down in 12 seconds. The elevator locked behind them. Inside the penthouse, Enzo was halfway through a hand of cards when the door burst open. They didn't shoot everyone, just him. 2 to the chest, 1 to the mouth. Final quiet. Just like Joseph said. The news broke the next morning. Local businessman Enzo Ricci killed in targeted home invasion. The media called it a robbery. The cops called it a gang dispute, but the streets? They called it balance. The name Joseph Ida was never printed. It didn't need to be. Everyone understood. The ghost still had teeth. Later that week, Silvio visited again. He found Joseph on the balcony, sipping red wine. "It's over," Silvio said. Joseph nodded. "It was over the moment he lit that fire outside my window." Silvio looked at him.
And now?
Joseph didn't answer for a while. He stared out at the skyline. "Now I go back to being what I was before." "And what's that?" Joseph smiled faintly. "A man who sleeps." In South Philly, when a man like Enzo Ricci gets buried, people don't ask questions. They just nod and talk quieter. They don't light candles.
They don't cry.
They tighten their circles, recheck their locks, and remember why some names still carry weight, even when their owners are too old to carry a pistol. But after Enzo's death, something strange happened. The streets didn't celebrate. They hesitated, not out of fear, not exactly, but because something had returned, something colder than bullets and more final than arrests. Order. And that order had a name: Joseph Ida. Joseph himself wasn't celebrating.
He didn't even go out that week.
He sat on his balcony, sipped his wine, and listened to the city hold its breath. Not a single siren screamed that night. Not a single kid revved an engine past midnight. It was as if the asphalt remembered who owned it. But peace never lasted. Especially not for a man with blood under his fingernails and ghosts at his table. 3 days after Enzo's hit,
A letter arrived, no return address, just one word on the envelope: penitence. Joseph's hands paused.
he didn't open it immediately, just held it for a moment, staring at the word like it was a name he once knew. A memory trying to speak again. Finally, he tore it open. The letter was handwritten, neat, sharp. "You killed a boy trying to become a man. You buried a fire with ash, but the fire spreads. The sins don't end when the blood dries. There's another name coming for you."
One you forgot. One who never forgot you. No signature, just
A small red fingerprint at the bottom. Joseph folded the
letter and slid it into the drawer with the others. It
wasn't the first warning he'd received, but it felt like a promise. Silvio came by the next evening. His face was tighter than usual, jaw clenched like it hurt to speak. "I heard something," he said, standing at the window, not facing Joseph. "Say it." "There's a name floating around."
someone no one's seen in years.
"Someone who shouldn't be alive." Joseph tilted his head.
Who? Silvio turned slowly. Antonio Little Tony.
Spadaro. Joseph's blood ran colder than the wine in his glass. That name hadn't crossed his lips in 3 decades. Tony Spadaro was once the sharpest blade in Joseph's drawer. Quick with a knife, quicker with a smile. He'd been the youngest man Joseph ever promoted to captain. Back in the early 60s, Tony had a reputation for doing what others wouldn't: kidnapping, torture, even a few high-profile hits that newspapers pinned on ghosts. But Tony wanted more. He didn't want to serve, he wanted to succeed. He made side deals with Jersey, played both ends of the street, and smiled while he did it. When Joseph found out, he didn't hesitate. He ordered the hit himself, but the body was never found. Only a burned-out car. Blood on the seat. Everyone assumed he was dead. Joseph never looked twice until now. "You sure it's him?" Joseph asked. Silvio shrugged.
As sure as the whispers let me be.
Guy calling himself Santo has been spotted in North Jersey. Old-school tattoos, same face, same swagger, but different name. Joseph stared out the window, the city lights flickering like dying stars. "If it's Tony, he ain't coming back for turf," he muttered. Silvio nodded. "He's coming for you." That night, Joseph couldn't sleep. Not from fear, but from the weight of memory. He sat in the dark, listening to the floor creak with age. The shadows felt heavier. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was watching him. He didn't dream of Pietro or Carly Boy. He dreamed of Tony, laughing, dragging a blade across someone's ribs in a dirty basement. "You made me, Joe," he said in the dream. "You just didn't like what I became." When Joseph woke up, there was sweat on his chest and blood in his mouth. He'd bitten his tongue in his sleep. In the weeks that followed, more letters arrived, each signed with that same red fingerprint, each naming someone else from Joseph's
Past. People he had forgotten, people he had buried. And every letter
ended with a variation of the same line. You left them behind, but they never left you. Then came the news. A warehouse in Trenton, one Joseph once used to move heroin in the 50s, was firebombed. Not by cops, not by rivals, but strategically. Files destroyed.
One man inside.
A 70-year-old bookkeeper. No enemies. No reason, except one. He used to work for Joseph. The message was clear. Tony wasn't going after Joseph's body. He was going after his history, burning it one piece at a time. Joseph called Silvio and told him to come, alone. They met in a closed-down boxing gym near the waterfront, one of their last untouched safe spots. "You know what this means," Joseph said. Silvio nodded. "It means the past ain't buried." Joseph lit a cigarette and stared at the ring where so many young men once bled for money and pride. "I made 100 soldiers in my time," he said. But Tony was the one I never could control. He smiled while he sinned. Silvio frowned. "We thought he was dead." Joseph blew out smoke.
That was our mistake.
"We buried smoke and called it fire." The problem wasn't just Tony, it was what he represented. Joseph wasn't fighting just one man anymore. He was fighting the echoes of his own reign. The consequences of choices made in alleys, in basements, in whispered conversations while the world slept. He had tried to retire, but you don't retire from being the devil. You just change suits. Joseph knew Tony wouldn't strike directly, not yet. Tony was theatrical. He liked long games, psychological cuts before physical ones, so Joseph decided to beat him at his own game. He called an old name, one he hadn't used in 20 years, Dominic Sapienza. A retired hitter who'd vanished into a Florida beach town and only answered calls from one number, Joseph's. When Dom picked up,
his voice was gravel wrapped in gin. "You still breathing, Joe?"
"Barely," Joseph said. "But I need your hands." "I thought you swore off blood." "This ain't blood," Joseph said.
"It's poison."
"And it's leaking into everything I built." Dom paused. "Spadaro?" Joseph didn't answer. He didn't have to. Dom just said, "Send me an address." The old crew started calling again.
Not all of them.
Just the ones who still remembered what real fear felt like. The ones who had killed not for glory, but for loyalty. They didn't ask questions, they just said, "You want this quiet or loud?" Joseph answered the same way every time, silent, like death before dawn. But even Joseph
knew this wasn't about a war anymore. This
was about finishing something he should have ended properly long ago. Tony wasn't just a loose end, he was unfinished business, an unfinished business.
Has a way of turning into a noose. One afternoon,
Carmela came by the apartment. She hadn't visited in weeks. Her face was softer now,
less tired,
but her eyes still held that quiet storm Joseph had come to love and fear. "I heard what's coming," she said. Joseph nodded. "Then you know I can't run from it." "I didn't come to stop you," she said.
"I came to ask you one thing." "What?"
"When it ends, really ends, don't leave me wondering." Joseph looked at her, tired, weathered, but still hers. "I won't," he said, and he meant it. The next night, he got the final letter, same red fingerprint, but this one had a date, a time and an address. Abandoned rail yard, northeast Philly, 3 a.m., no threats, no riddles, just an invitation, a meeting, or maybe an execution. Joseph didn't bring backup. He didn't wear a vest. He didn't carry a gun. He just wore a black coat, a silver ring, and the look of a man who had seen every version of death. And come back bored, he arrived 10 minutes early, waited.
In the dark, the yard was empty, silent. Then
A figure stepped from the shadows, tall, lean, greying, hair, a face that hadn't aged so much as
hardened. Tony, alive, smiling just like in the dream. "You look tired."
Joe, Tony said. "I've been tired since you faked your death." Tony chuckled. "Not fake, just redirected." Joseph nodded.
"You sent the letters." Tony spread his arms.
Every prophet needs his gospel. And the warehouse? The bookkeeper? History has a cost. Joseph stepped forward.
"So why the theatrics, Tony? Why not just kill me?"
Tony's smile faded. "Because you're the only father I ever had." Silence. Then, "And because I need you to see it fall. Everything you built, your name, your silence."
"I want you to watch it rot before your eyes." Joseph nodded. "You always did love a stage." Tony reached into his coat and Joseph braced, but it wasn't a gun, it was a photo of Joseph.
Sitting on his balcony. From days ago, Tony leaned in and whispered, "You're not safe."
"Not from the outside, not from inside."
"The wolves you raised are still hungry." Then he dropped the photo and walked away. Joseph stood in the rail yard for a long time, wind cutting across his face like knives. The photo flapped on the ground behind him, and for the first time since Enzo Ricci died, Joseph Ida felt small, because this wasn't over. This was the beginning of the final act. The real ghosts weren't coming in letters, they were already here. The rail yard felt colder after Tony left. Joseph stood there long after the wind had picked up, after the photo Tony dropped had flown away down the tracks, lost to the night. It wasn't fear holding him there. It was something else, something deeper than dread, something he hadn't felt since Pietro's last breath haunted his sleep. Responsibility. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about what he'd left behind, the seeds he'd planted when he built an empire of blood and whispered commands. He had thought retiring meant escaping the dirt, but all he'd done was step off the battlefield while the war continued under a new flag. Tony was his fault. Fully. And now that fault was demanding payment. The next morning, Joseph didn't drink coffee. He didn't sit on his balcony or skim the newspaper. He went straight to his closet, opened the floorboard he hadn't touched in years, and pulled out a small black box. Inside it was a .38 revolver, polished clean, oiled once a year like a religious ritual. He ran his hand over the steel. "Old friend," he whispered. Silvio came that afternoon. He didn't knock, he just walked in and sat down, his face pale and tight. "I heard." Joseph nodded.
"I saw him. Jesus. Alive. Confident. Making moves." Silvio exhaled through his nose.
"What does he want?" Joseph didn't answer right away. Then, finally, "He wants to destroy the memory of me. Not just the man, but the myth. He wants to burn my name." Silvio shook his head. "Then we take him out. We do it fast, clean, with fire and steel." Joseph looked at him, calm but sharp. "No," Silvio frowned. "What do you mean, no? You think this is something we can talk out?"
"I mean, he's mine," Joseph said. "I built him. I fed him.
I taught him how to slit throats with a smile. And now he's circling me like a hungry son with daddy issues. So let's shoot the bastard." Joseph leaned back. "He wants something more than death. He wants to erase me. The only way I beat him is if I die on my terms. Or if he does." That night Joseph didn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table, the revolver resting beside a tumbler of scotch, a lit cigarette slowly burning in an ashtray. The apartment was silent except for the tick of the old wall clock. He looked around. The pictures on the walls. Carmela's wedding photo. His daughter's faded kindergarten drawing tucked into a frame. The things he had once killed to protect. The things he had let rot while he sat in shadows, convincing himself he was too broken to go back. But now Tony had opened the final chapter. Joseph made 3 calls the next morning. The first to a man in Newark, Lenny Casaro, a retired forger who owed Joseph his life. "I need eyes on Tony. Phone.
Records, movements, safe houses. I
Want to know where he sleeps and who keeps him." Breathing, Lenny didn't ask. Why? The second call was to Father Moretti, the only priest in Philadelphia who would still take Joseph's calls. "I need to talk." The priest's voice was hesitant, but soft.
Come at night, of course, the third call.
Was to Carmela. He didn't expect her to answer, but she did. "Joe, I need to see you." There was a pause. Then, "I'm at the church." Joseph arrived at St. Gabriel's under grey skies, his black coat flapping in the wind. Carmela was waiting on the steps.
Arms folded, the same way she used to wait outside the
butcher shop when he was late for dinner 30 years ago. He walked up,
slow. She didn't speak until he was close. "I know why you're here," I figured. "You're not just going to finish him, are you?"
He blinked. "I have to." "You're going to finish yourself too." He looked down at the concrete steps, at the cracks between them. "Maybe," he said, "but only if that's the cost." Carmela stepped closer. "You're not that man anymore." "I have to be," he said. One last time. Inside the church, the air smelled of incense and old wood. Father Moretti sat in a pew near the altar, hands folded, eyes closed as if he'd been waiting his entire life for this moment. Joseph sat down beside him. No words were exchanged for several minutes. Then, Moretti whispered, "You once asked me if God forgives men like you." Joseph nodded. "I still don't know the answer," Moretti said. "But maybe forgiveness isn't something you ask for. Maybe it's something you earn by how you end the story." Joseph exhaled. "I'm tired of stories," Moretti smiled faintly. "Then write a new one."
"Even if it's the last page." The next day, Lenny Casaro delivered. Tony had been bouncing between safe houses, one in North Jersey, another in Fishtown, and a third, an old warehouse Joseph used to own before he retired.
It was poetic in the cruelest way.
Tony was literally living in Joseph's leftovers, sleeping in the skeletons of his legacy. "He's setting up something," Lenny said.
"Recruiting, gearing up." Joseph asked the question that mattered most. When's he most vulnerable?
Lenny didn't hesitate.
Tuesday nights?
11 p.m. He plays poker with 3 of his top guys. No security inside.
Just a driver waiting in the lot. Everyone else's phones stay off. Joseph nodded. Good. Tuesday came like a funeral bell. Joseph dressed slowly, no suit. Just dark jeans, black turtleneck, a coat heavy with memories and steel. He tucked the revolver into his waistband, said nothing to the mirror, and walked out without locking the door behind him. Some part of him didn't plan to return. The warehouse was dimly lit. The windows were fogged with dust and time. Joseph parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest. Every step felt heavier, not with fear, but with finality. He didn't bring backup, didn't need it. This wasn't a hit, this was a reckoning. The door creaked when he entered. One of Tony's men, skinny, twitchy, barely out of his 20s, stepped forward, shot. Joseph didn't wait. One punch. Clean, silent. Dictador kid dropped like a rag doll. Joseph moved through, the halls like a ghost walking the floor.
Of his own mausoleum. He reached the back room. He didn't. Knock. He kicked the door open. Inside.
Tony sat at a poker table with 3
men, cigars, cash, laughter. The moment shattered, the...
Men reached for guns. Joseph fired first. 2 shots. 2. Down. The third man bolted through a side door. Gone. Tony stayed seated, unflinching. "Welcome back," he said. Joseph didn't lower the gun. Tony gestured at the
Bodies? Bit dramatic, don't you think?
Joseph stepped forward. "You never learned the difference between power and theatre." Tony chuckled. "No, I learned it."
I just chose the one that sells better. Joseph's hands didn't shake. He was calm. Cold. This ends now. Tony stood up. No, it doesn't. You shoot me and I become a martyr.
My guys will post my face across every borough.
They'll paint murals. You'll be the shadow that killed the future. Joseph's eyes narrowed. I didn't come here to shoot you. Tony blinked. What? I came to offer you something worse. He tossed the revolver onto the table, then pulled out a recorder. A wire. Tony froze. What the hell is this?
Your voice, your confession, your life story, broadcast to the world. Every deal.
Every hit, every betrayal.
You become the very thing you fear most. Joseph leaned in, eyes burning. "Forgettable!" Tony lunged. Joseph slammed his fist into his throat, then pinned him to the wall. "You want to destroy me?" "Here I am, take the shot," Tony gasped, voice cracking. I
didn't come this far to go quiet." Joseph's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then you'll go empty." He
walked out 10 minutes later. Tony was alive, beaten, broken, stripped.
Of every man around him, the police would find the tape in the
morning. The feds would have enough to erase. Tony in courtrooms. Not alleys, no body, no bullet, just silence. Back at the apartment, Joseph sat in the dark. No sirens, no shadows, just the city breathing slow again. Carmela came by at dawn. She found him sitting at the table, alive, unwounded, and for the first time in their long, twisted life together, unburdened. The city had gone quiet again. After the fall of Enzo Ricci and the slow dismantling of Tony Spadaro's shadow network, Philadelphia's underworld didn't erupt in war. It froze.
No one moved without permission.
The young bloods lost their taste for rebellion, and the old names who remembered what true order felt like returned to their corners with folded hands and watchful eyes. Joseph Ida, once again, had cleaned house, but this time he didn't keep the keys. He had no interest in reclaiming the throne. He had sat on it long enough to know that all thrones were really just
headstones waiting to be engraved. It had been a
week since he handed over the recorder with Tony's confession. The feds swept in, quiet, surgical and brutal.
Raids in Jersey,
indictments in Trenton. They built a case so tight that even Tony's name started fading before the echo of it could gain traction. He wasn't a martyr. He wasn't a legend. He was a man who got caught. And in this life, that was the worst thing to be. Joseph didn't celebrate. There were no drinks.
No toasts, no cigars lit in dark basements while bodies were buried in the woods. He simply sat in his apartment, older now, a little slower,
with a left shoulder that still ached when it rained, and stared out over a city he'd once ruled. He'd removed the last threat to his name. He'd buried the past twice, and yet something still lingered, a kind of hollowness that only comes when the war you've been fighting for half your life finally ends. It was on a Thursday morning, sometime around 9 a.m. when the knock came. Not loud,
not urgent.
Just 3 taps on the door, polite, almost hesitant. Joseph stood in the kitchen, toast in the toaster, black coffee steaming in his mug. He glanced toward the door. He wasn't expecting anyone. Carmela hadn't called. Silvio was upstate handling the final transfers. No one came to visit Joseph without warning. He approached slowly, his old .38 tucked in his waistband by instinct, and opened the door just enough to peek out, and there, standing in the hallway, was a young man, maybe 19, maybe 20, Slim, nervous but not afraid. He had black curly hair, olive skin, and a pair of eyes that made Joseph freeze, because they weren't just familiar, they were Pietro Costa's eyes. The kid shifted awkwardly.
You don't know me.
My name's Leo. Joseph opened the door wider but said nothing. The kid swallowed. I think
you knew my father. Joseph stepped outside, closed the door behind him,
and locked it. Not to keep Leo out, but to keep the past in. They walked down the street in silence for a block before Joseph finally spoke. Your father's name? Domenico Leo Costa. Joseph stopped walking. The name hit him like cold water. Costa, he said.
Your grandfather, Pietro.
The kid nodded. Joseph stared at him. The math added up. The resemblance was there, but what made his blood chill was the timing. I didn't know Pietro had a son. He didn't, Leo said.
Not exactly. Joseph raised an eyebrow. Leo rubbed the back of his neck. It's complicated.
My mom told me when I was 16.
Said I came from a mistake.
Said my real father was a man she met only once.
He never even knew I existed. Joseph's voice went quiet.
Your mother's name? Teresa Marino. Joseph sat down on the stone edge of a storefront, suddenly light-headed. He remembered Teresa. Young, sharp-tongued. She'd worked as a waitress at one of the social clubs back in the day. Pietro had taken a liking to her. He'd warned him once. Keep it clean, he said.
That girl's got dreams.
Don't turn her into another ghost. But Pietro didn't listen, and Joseph let it slide. It was the only time he'd ever looked away from Pietro's mess. Now the mess had a name. Leo, why are you here? Joseph finally asked. Leo took a long breath. My mother passed last month. Cancer. She left me a letter. Said if I ever wanted to understand where I came from.
I had to find you? Joseph looked at the kid.
Not a punk.
Not a liar. Just a boy chasing shadows. You think I'm going to tell you who he was?
Leo shrugged.
I don't even know if I want to know.
But I figured if anyone could tell it straight, it'd be the man who killed him. The words hit like a slow knife. Joseph didn't respond, didn't deny it. Leo sat down beside him. I read about you, he said.
Not just the headlines.
The real stories, the kind they don't print. Joseph stared ahead. Then you know I'm not a man who should be telling stories. Leo nodded. Maybe not, but I still need to hear it. That night, Joseph cooked dinner, not for himself, for Leo. They sat at the small kitchen table, the same table Joseph had once used to lay out blueprints for territory wars and count blood-soaked dollars. Now it held pasta, bread, and silence. After the meal, Leo finally asked the question, "Why did you do it?" Joseph stared at the bottom of his wine glass for a long time. Then he spoke, because he stopped listening. "To you?" "No," Joseph said.
To the code.
"To the reason we built all of this in the first place. Pietro was a brother to me."
I loved him.
But love in this world doesn't mean mercy. It means expectation. It means we hold each other accountable. When he broke that, I had to choose between protecting him and protecting everything we stood for. Leo nodded slowly. You ever regret it? Joseph's eyes drifted to the window. I regret a lot of things, but killing your grandfather wasn't one of them. Leo didn't flinch. He just asked the second question. Do you think I'll become like him? Joseph looked at him long, hard. You get to choose. Leo stood. I think I already have. And then, just before walking to the door, he turned. I'm not here to join the life. Mr. Ida, I just needed to know if my blood doomed me. I think I got my answer. Joseph nodded. You're smarter than all of us were. Leo smiled faintly. My mum was smart.
I got that from her. Then he was gone, after the door closed.
Joseph sat in silence for nearly an hour, and for the first time since Pietro's death, he cried, not out of guilt, not out of shame, but because, for once a ghost had returned, not to haunt him, but to set him free. That night he dreamed again. But not of screams, not of bullets or burning cars, just Pietro and Joseph sitting on the steps of their childhood home, passing a cigarette back and forth, laughing about something neither of them remembered. Pietro looked at him and said, "You did all right, Joe, even if it took you a little longer." When Joseph woke up, he was smiling. Joseph Ida woke up before the sun. It wasn't because of a nightmare.
Not this time.
No footsteps in the hallway. No drowned voices calling from under the floorboards. Just the soft, eerie stillness of a city still asleep. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the light crawling across the wall, listening to the tick of the clock on the dresser. He had slept, and not the shallow, jittery sleep of old gangsters waiting for the next bullet.
Real sleep. Dreamless. Quiet. That hadn't happened in decades. Maybe
it was Leo. Maybe it was finally telling the truth about Pietro, confessing something that had lived in the walls of his ribcage for 40 years. Or maybe it was just time. Either way, it felt like the world had finally let him rest. For now. Later that morning, Joseph made himself breakfast. 2 eggs, toast, black coffee. He sat at the kitchen table flipping through a newspaper he didn't care about and pretending the world outside didn't know who he was. Then the phone rang. The landline.
not his cell.
The one almost no one had the number to anymore. He picked it up without a word. A familiar voice greeted him. "Still breathing, Joe?" Joseph smiled faintly. "Depends who's asking. It's Tommy Marchese." That name took him back instantly, back to narrow alleyways in 1968, back to the meatpacking district where Joseph once helped Tommy bury his cousin after a card game went sideways. "I figured you were either dead or in Vegas." "I've been both." "Now I'm neither." Joseph leaned back. "What do you want, Tommy?" There was a pause on the line. "Then, I need a favor." Joseph let the silence hang. Tommy spoke again, quieter now. "My grandson, he's in trouble." Tommy Marchese had been one of the old city's best enforcers. Smart, brutal, loyal. The kind of guy who could shoot someone on Sunday and go to church that night with clean shoes. Joseph hadn't seen him in nearly 20 years. Not since Tommy moved out to Phoenix after the Fed started nosing around his second indictment. Hearing from him now, that meant desperation. "Talk," Joseph said. Tommy's voice cracked just a bit. "His name's Ryan, 24. Kid's got brains, heart, but no street sense."
He's working with people he shouldn't be. Drugs.
Worse, people trafficking guns down from Ohio. Feds are sniffing.
One of his friends just turned up in the school kill. Joseph rubbed his temples. "And you think I can do what?"
"Pull him out."
"You're the only guy left who can walk into a room and make grown men piss themselves with one look. If anyone can scare him straight, it's you." Joseph didn't answer right away. Tommy continued. "He doesn't know who I am."
I kept the family history from him, but I told him he'd be meeting someone important.
"Someone who owes me," Joseph exhaled. "You know I'm out." "Yeah. But out doesn't mean blind." Joseph closed his eyes. "I'll think about it." That night,
Joseph sat on his balcony, watching the sky fade from grey to black. Carmela had brought him cannoli earlier, kissed his cheek and said nothing about the past week. She never did. They existed in a quiet understanding now, like two veterans who had survived a war they no longer spoke of. He thought about Leo, about the boy who came looking for the truth and left with a future. He'd given Leo a clean exit. Could he do the same for Tommy's grandson? Would it even matter? Was redemption transferable? The next morning, he met Ryan Marchese. The kid showed up in baggy jeans, a sweatshirt too big for him, and an attitude thicker than concrete. He had a busted lip, tattoos up his arms, and a phone he wouldn't stop checking. They met at a diner in South Philly. "Ryan didn't even say hello. You're the old guy?" Joseph sipped his coffee. "Some say that. My grandfather said you were some kind of boss." Joseph shrugged. "Used to be."
"Now I just eat eggs," Ryan scoffed.
"This is a waste of time." Joseph put his coffee down. "Is it?"
Ryan stood up, clearly irritated. "You've got no idea what I'm in. These guys?
"They don't talk like you. They don't play cards in clubs and wear suits. They wear Kevlar and carry Glocks. They'll kill you just for looking wrong." Joseph leaned forward. "You think I don't know killers?" Ryan laughed, a hard, bitter sound. "You're ancient. Your war ended before I was born." Joseph's voice dropped to a whisper. "And yet, here you are, still trying to prove you're worth the blood in your veins." Ryan's eyes narrowed. "What do you know about that?" Joseph leaned back. "I know your grandfather cleaned more blood off his hands than you've ever seen spilled.
I know he walked away so you wouldn't have to learn the things he did.
And I know you're throwing all that away for what?"
A few $1,000s and the illusion of power."
Ryan didn't respond. Joseph continued. "I'm not here to scare you.
I am here to warn you."
That path you're on, it ends two ways, a cell or a coffin. There's no throne, no glory, just silence and cold concrete." Ryan stared at him for a long time, then sat back down. Quiet now over the next week. Joseph met Ryan 3 more times. The kid started asking questions. "How did you walk away? Why didn't they come for you? Do you ever feel clean?" Joseph answered every question truthfully. He didn't sugarcoat the life. He didn't romanticize the blood. He just told the kid the cost and the debt. Then came the turning point. Ryan showed up one night at Joseph's apartment, eyes wide.
Breath ragged. "They killed Mikey." Joseph didn't flinch. "Who?"
"One of the guys in my crew.
"Said he stole from the last shipment."
They shot him in the face. Dumped him near the river." Joseph closed his eyes. "Now do you understand?" Ryan sat on the floor shaking. "I don't know how to get out." Joseph walked over to a drawer, pulled out a slip of paper. "Take this. Go to this man.
"His name is Vinny Trejo. He's quiet, clean. He owes me."
He'll put you to work in a garage upstate.
"Cash, no questions." "You stay there."
You disappear." Ryan looked at the paper like it was a ticket to another life. "Will I ever come back?" Joseph looked him dead in the eyes. "Not if you want to live." That night, Ryan left Philly. No goodbye, no promises, just silence. Joseph watched the bus leave from a bench across the street, and for the first time since he was 20 years old, he felt like he'd done something good, something pure. 3 days later, Tommy called. "Is he safe?" Joseph nodded into the phone. "He's gone." Tommy's voice cracked. "Thank you." "You don't owe me," Joseph said. "You already paid." There was a long pause on the other end. Then, "I hope they say the same about you someday." That night, Joseph opened his notebook one last time, the one he hadn't touched since the day Leo walked out. He turned to the final page, wrote just 5 words. "One life saved." That's enough. Then he closed it and never opened it again. There's a peculiar kind of peace that comes when you think you've done your last good deed. Joseph had felt it the night Ryan Marchese's bus disappeared into the horizon.
That was supposed to be it.
The full circle, the moment where, after decades of blood, betrayal, and smoke-filled rooms, he could finally say, "I saved one." He didn't tell Carmela what he'd done. He didn't brag to Silvio. There was no pride in the act, only relief. For a few days, he walked lighter, slept longer, even smiled at the woman who sold flowers outside the deli. The old city around him, once heavy and watchful, seemed to exhale alongside him. But peace, he knew, was a fragile lie. It never lasted in Philadelphia. It started with a visit from Marco Leone, one of Silvio's newer captains. Clean-cut, barely in his 40s, sharp suits and sharper smiles. Joseph had always found him too polished, too smooth. The kind of man who would step over a body and apologize only if someone was watching. He showed up at Joseph's apartment mid-morning, holding a box of pastries from Isgro's like a bribe. Joseph raised an eyebrow. Didn't think I rated pastries anymore. Marco chuckled, placed the box on the table. Just paying my respects. You didn't bring coffee, Marco smirked. Didn't want to assume I'd be invited to stay. Joseph opened the box, pulled out a cannoli, and sat down. Well, he said, you're standing, so speak. Marco shifted, tone dropping. There's been talk. Nothing official. Just murmurs, whispers, Joseph said. City's heartbeat. Marco nodded. Some of the younger guys, they're saying Silvio's getting soft.
That he's too cautious.
That he's running scared after what happened with Tony and Enzo. Joseph chewed slowly. He's being smart. There's a difference. Sure, but smart doesn't always win hearts. Especially not in this world. Joseph narrowed his eyes. Is that your way of saying you want the chair?
Marco laughed. No, God, no.
I know better than to grab something still warm. Joseph leaned forward, elbows on the table. Then why are you here? Marco's smile faded. Because someone else might. And I thought you should hear it from me. That night, Joseph sat on the balcony longer than usual. The city buzzed below, a familiar static, horns, distant shouts, the soft thrum of electricity running through concrete veins. He called Silvio. Told him what Marco had said. Silvio's voice was tired.
I've heard the same. Names?
No one solid. Just younger blood guys who think 10 quiet years means the wolves fell asleep. Joseph lit a cigarette. Want me to shake some trees? Silvio sighed. Would it help?
No, Joseph admitted.
But it'd make me feel useful. There was a pause. Then Silvio said something he hadn't said in years. Watch your back. Joe. The warning came the next day. A man Joseph hadn't seen since the 1980s. Frankie Baldino.
Once a loyal foot soldier, now a shell of the man he used to be.
He showed up outside the church Joseph sometimes visited. Eyes hollow, hair white.
Suit too big for his shrinking frame. You need to know, Frankie said.
Looking around like the shadows were listening. Know what?
It ain't the street boys making noise. It's someone close. Someone in the circle. Joseph's gut tightened. Who?
Frankie hesitated.
They'll kill me if I say it. Joseph's voice turned cold.
Then why are you here?
Frankie looked him dead in the eyes, because even now, after everything, I still owe you. Then he walked away, disappearing into the South Philly mist. Joseph didn't sleep that night, not because of guilt, not from nightmares, because his mind was turning, slowly, painfully,
back into what it once was, a machine of instinct and suspicion. He replayed every conversation, every look, every silence from the last 6 months. Then he called Carmela. I need you to leave the city for a few days. Her voice was calm. Is it bad? It might be. She didn't ask questions. She never did. Joseph started watching not just the street, his people. He watched the way Marco moved, the way other captains hesitated when Silvio spoke, the way his name, Joseph Ida, no longer commanded silence in the way it used to. It didn't take long to uncover the truth, because betrayal, like blood, always leaves a trail. It was a Thursday when he found the recording. Silvio had called a meeting with the top capos at a private lounge on Market Street. Joseph wasn't invited, but he had a man on the inside, a bartender, one of his old loyalty markers, paid and forgotten, until now. The recording was clean. Silvio's voice, calm as ever. We need to consider what comes next. Joseph's still respected, but he's a liability. If anyone finds out what really happened with Spadaro, the whole thing could collapse. A second voice. Marco's. So what are you saying?
A pause. Then Silvio again. I'm saying.
Maybe it's time we bury the last ghost. Joseph listened to the tape 3 times. Then he poured himself a drink. No anger, no sorrow, just the cold, bone-deep feeling of understanding even Silvio, even the last man he had trusted with his life. That night, Joseph didn't sleep. He wrote a
letter? Not to Silvio, to Carmela. He told her.
where to find the safe deposit box. He told her what to do if the news ever said was found in his sleep. He told her he was sorry for
everything. Then he placed the letter
in an envelope and left it on the kitchen counter. The next morning, he dressed like it was 1957. Black suit, polished shoes, tie tight. He called Silvio, said, "Let's talk." Silvio agreed to meet him at an old cigar lounge they used to use for sit-downs in the 70s. Neutral ground, no watches, no weapons, so they said Joseph arrived first, sat in the back booth, lit a cigar with hands that didn't tremble. He waited exactly 7 minutes, then Tuva walked
in alone. Also Joseph
believed they exchanged pleasantries like old friends. Two aging giants in a world they built with blood and lost to time. Then Joseph placed the recorder on the table, pressed play. Silvio's face didn't change, not once. When it finished, Joseph asked the question, "Why?" Silvio leaned forward. "I was tired of waiting for you to die." Joseph blinked. "You could have just asked me to step aside." "I did," Silvio said.
Every time you said you were out, you came back.
"You saved the kid. You took out Tony. You remind everyone who really runs this city without saying a word." Joseph exhaled. "So what now?" Silvio nodded toward the door. Two men stepped in, Marco and another face Joseph didn't recognize, young, nervous, but armed. Joseph stood slowly. "I'm not going out in the back of a restaurant."
Silvio nodded. "I know." Joseph's hand moved to his coat. Marco tensed, but Joseph didn't reach for a gun. He reached for a cigarette, lit it, took a long drag. "You forgot the rule, Silvio." "What rule?"
Joseph blew out smoke. "Never try to kill a man who has nothing left to lose." Then the window behind him shattered. A shot rang out. Marco dropped like a sack of bricks. Headshot. Clean. The second man spun too slow. Joseph reached under the table and fired once, straight into the chest. He fell, gasping. Silvio backed up.
"Stunned? You what?"
Joseph stood tall, revolver steady. "You think I walk into a trap blind?"
"I invented the trap," Silvio raised his hands. "I never wanted it to end like this." Joseph stepped closer. "I never wanted it to end." He pressed the gun to Silvio's chest.
They stared at each other. Years of brotherhood, loyalty, betrayal. Joseph didn't pull the trigger. He just said, "You're already dead," and walked out. No one chased him. No cops were called. The city simply understood. The king had spoken. That night, Joseph returned home, sat at the table, opened a fresh bottle of wine, and waited for silence to return. For a man like Joseph Ida, survival was never the goal. It was just a side effect of winning. After the betrayal, the shooting at the cigar lounge, and the quiet erasure of Silvio Marchese's legacy from the Philadelphia underworld, Joseph returned to his apartment not as a fugitive, but as something stranger, an unwanted legend still breathing. He sat in the same chair where he had once waited for death, lit the same cigar, stared out the same window. But something had changed. No more enemies, no capos plotting in lounges, no street kids trying to make a name by taking his head, no feds knocking on doors with sealed warrants and weak smiles. Only silence, only wait, only a city that had moved on, leaving behind the man who once owned its soul. For the next few weeks, Joseph kept to himself. He walked early, cooked small meals. Sometimes he visited the church and sat in the back pew, not to pray but to listen to the sound of things that didn't ask for blood. The paper called the incident at the lounge a robbery gone bad. No names were published, no autopsies leaked, no whispers reached the surface. The streets knew better than to speak. Everyone understood. The quiet Don had finished his final war. One afternoon, Carmela returned. She walked into the apartment like she never left, her heels echoing softly across the floor. Her face was calm, her hair streaked with more silver now, but her eyes held that same quiet challenge. "I saw the news," she said. Joseph stood at the sink, rinsing dishes. They made it sound messier than it was. Carmela raised an eyebrow. "You're cleaning dishes, so I assume you're still alive?" Joseph dried his hands. "They made a move. I made mine. It's done." She nodded, sat at the table, and opened a container of bakery cookies without asking. They sat in silence for a long time. Then she asked, "So is that it? You're done for good?" Joseph looked at her, and for once said nothing. Because even now, with all his enemies gone, he wasn't sure if done was something a man like him ever truly became. It was the following Thursday when the knock came. It wasn't soft, wasn't panicked, just firm, like someone who knew exactly who they were coming to see. Joseph opened the door, and for the first time in years, his past had a face he didn't expect. She was maybe 50, maybe older, with long dark hair streaked grey at the temples and a heavy coat that hadn't seen a dry cleaner in months. She looked worn, but not fragile. And she stared at Joseph with the kind of intensity that meant she'd rehearsed this moment for a long time. "Mr. Ida," she said. He didn't speak. "I'm Anna Ventura. My father was Nico Ventura." Joseph's stomach sank. He hadn't heard that name since 1971. Nico Ventura had been many things: fixer, informant, sometimes a friend. But mostly, he was a man caught between two worlds, the one Joseph ruled and the one the feds tried to lure him into. When Nico started talking, just a little, just enough, Joseph had no choice. The decision came fast. The result was permanent. Joseph never saw the body, but he ordered the hit himself. And now, decades later, the daughter had come knocking. Joseph stepped aside. "Come in." She walked in, slow and deliberate, like the room owed her something. He gestured toward the chair. She didn't sit. "You killed my father," she said. Joseph closed the door. Yes, the air between them grew heavier. Anna didn't flinch. I figured that much. My mother died not knowing, but I always suspected. When I turned 18, I started asking questions. Everyone said the same thing. Nico was a good man, but he got too close to the wrong ones. Joseph didn't deny it.
"I warned him," he said. "He made his choice." "He made it for me too," Anna said. Joseph looked at her, and she let it spill. "I grew up in silence. No answers, no closure, just shadows. You built an empire and buried my father under it."
"But I'm not here for revenge." Joseph raised an eyebrow. "No, I'm here because I want your help." Joseph didn't speak right away. He studied her. She wasn't lying. Her voice didn't waver. Her hands didn't shake. She wasn't looking for sympathy. She wasn't looking to shame him. She had something else in mind. "What kind of help?" he asked. Anna finally sat down. "There's someone I need to find. A man named Vic Russo." "You knew him?" Joseph blinked. "Russo's dead." Anna shook her head. "No, he faked his death in '95. I've been tracking him for 10 years. He's not just hiding, he's hiding behind your name." Joseph sat forward. "Explain." Anna pulled a folded folder from her coat. Inside were photos, grainy, zoomed, street angles from alleyways and airport lobbies. The same man in each shot, tall, wide shoulders, same scar above the left eyebrow. "You remember what he did?" she asked. Joseph remembered too well. Vic Russo had once run collections for Joseph's Northside crew. Smart, dangerous but greedy. When the heroin started flowing from Jersey, Vic skimmed, lied, and disappeared. After someone found a wire in his cousin's safe house, he was presumed dead after a supposed shootout in Camden. Apparently, he'd faked it. He killed my uncle, Anna said. Ran a side racket in '96 using your name to intimidate people. Claimed he was still under your umbrella. Joseph frowned. He wasn't. I know, but he's doing it again, running scams, threatening families. Last week he shook down a bakery owner in South Philly. Said, "This is Ida's town." Joseph's hand curled into a fist. Anna placed the folder on the table. "I need him gone. I need him to stop dragging your name across the city like a corpse." Joseph exhaled. "You came to me instead of the cops."
Why? She met his gaze. Because the cops won't find him. But you will. You built this city. You still know how it breathes. You gave me silence. I'm asking you now to give me closure. Joseph looked down at the photos. Russo was older,
Heavier, but alive, somehow still operating under the myth Joseph left behind. "Where was this taken?" he asked, holding one of the photos. 3 weeks ago, Jersey side. He's got a house outside Elizabeth." Joseph stood. "I'll need a car." 2 days later, Joseph was standing across the street from a cracked white house with a crooked porch and a dying lawn. Vic Russo was inside. He watched him through binoculars, saw the man smoking on the back steps like he didn't have a care in the world. Joseph had seen ghosts before. This one just hadn't realized he was already dead. He waited until nightfall, then knocked. When Vic opened the door, his face drained of blood. "Joe." Joseph raised a silenced pistol and pressed it to Vic's forehead.
"Say my name again and it'll be your last word." Vic backed up, trembling. "Hey, listen, things got messy. You used my name after you betrayed my crew, after you faked your own death." Vic whimpered. "I had no choice."
"You know how it was? Jersey was coming for me. You made your choice the day you ran." Joseph walked him backward into the kitchen. "You took money from the streets. Then you smeared my name across the walls like graffiti." "Please," Vic begged. "I got a daughter." "So did Nico Ventura." Joseph pulled the trigger. One shot, quiet and final. He left the body in the chair, then took out a pen, scribbled 3 words on a scrap of newspaper, and left it beside the corpse. Joseph says hello. Anna met him the next morning outside a corner cafe. He handed her the folder back. "It's done." She stared at him for a long time, then nodded. "I thought I'd feel more." "You will," he said. "Later, when the silence hits you." She didn't thank him. She didn't cry. She just walked away. And for Joseph, that was enough. That night, Joseph poured himself a glass of wine and opened a book he hadn't touched in years. It was fiction, something with no blood in it, just people, living, trying, failing, loving. It made him smile. He sipped his wine, and for the first time in his long, violent life, he felt like a man, not a ghost, not a don, just a man who had done wrong and tried once to make it right. The city was quiet again. It always circled back to silence. After the bullets, after the betrayals, after the long conversations that hovered like smoke above espresso cups and shaking hands, silence always crept back in like a final breath. Joseph Ida had made peace in his own way. One by one, he had buried his enemies, atoned for old sins, and cleaned the blood from the steps of the city he once ruled. He had walked away from war, from power, from the version of himself that had scared men into prayer and forced families into exile. Now he was just a man who cooked for himself, a man who watered the dying plant on his windowsill, a man who woke up each day with one question in his chest: is today the day I go? But death didn't scare Joseph anymore. It wasn't a shadow in the hallway or a noise in the night. It was a chair. It was the creak in his knees when he stood up too fast, the silence of the phone that hadn't rung in days, the soft, ticking loneliness that replaced ambition. He had survived every war but one, the one inside him. It was mid-November when he got the letter. Not an email, not a call, a real letter. Handwritten, envelope, yellowed by weather. No return address. Just his name, Joseph Ida, printed in neat, perfect cursive. He sat at the table and opened it slowly, like a priest opening last rites. Inside, just a few lines. You don't remember me, but I remember you. You killed my brother. 1965, you left him in the alley behind St. Dominic's. You never even looked back.
I want to talk.
No threats, no traps. Just the truth. I'll be at Rousseau's Diner on 9th and Bainbridge. Friday, 7 p.m. No name, just the echo of a past Joseph had buried with too many others. He didn't remember the brother. Too many faces.
Too many bodies. He tried. He truly did. But by the time you've ordered your 50th hit, the names all start to feel like smoke. Something burned.
Something gone, but the letter was real. And it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like closure. And Joseph Ida, he knew something about needing that. Carmela came by that morning. She brought him soup and an old scarf he had forgotten she'd knitted back in '92. She didn't mention the letter, but she saw it on the table, saw the way Joseph kept glancing at it like it was whispering something only he could hear. Finally she said, "You're going, aren't you?" Joseph nodded. "It's not a trap," he said. "I know," she said. "That's what makes it worse." Rousseau's Diner hadn't changed in 50 years. Same neon sign, same red vinyl booths, same cracked countertop, where Joseph had once told a kid from Camden that loyalty mattered more than money. That kid ended up dead in Atlantic City 2 weeks later. Joseph arrived early, ordered coffee, didn't touch it. At exactly 7:04, a man walked in, mid-60s, maybe, tall, thin, wore a weathered trench coat and an old Phillies. Cap pulled low. He walked straight to Joseph's booth. "You
came," he said. Joseph nodded. The man sat across from him. They didn't shake hands. They didn't
smile. "My name is Anthony D'Amico," the man said. "My brother was Paulie." D'Amico. Joseph's heart flickered like a bulb suddenly remembering how to burn. Paulie. A name he hadn't heard in over 5 decades, he remembered. Now, Paulie D'Amico had been a runner, fast, loyal but greedy. Got caught slipping a few ounces of heroin from the backroom stash, tried to sell it out in Camden, and then blamed it on another guy when questioned. Joseph gave the order, 2 shots to the back of the head, left in the alley behind St. Dominic's, no headlines.
No arrests.
Just vanished. I was 16, Anthony said. He told me he was going to meet a friend, said he'd be back for dinner. Joseph didn't speak. I waited until 2 a.m. My mother cried for a week, then stopped, just like that. Like grief was too heavy for our house. Still, Joseph said nothing. Anthony looked up. "You don't even remember him, do you?"
"I do now." Too late. Joseph nodded.
No. They sat in silence. 2 old men surrounded by clinking
forks and distant rock and roll from a blank
jukebox that hadn't been updated since Reagan. Anthony reached into his coat. Joseph's hand twitched.
Toward his own, then stopped when he saw what...
Anthony pulled out a photo, faded, creased. Paulie, young, smiling, arm
slung around a teenage Anthony on a
fishing boat. "I kept this in my wallet since 1971, Anthony said. Not because I wanted to remember him, but because I didn't want to forget what you took." Joseph reached out.
"Touched the edge of the photo. I'm sorry," he said. Anthony smiled, bitter. "No, you're not. I am. Not for killing him."
"You're sorry for what it did to you." Joseph didn't argue because he was right. "I came here tonight," Anthony said, "not to get even."
I thought about that for years. God, I fantasized about it. Shooting you in the back.
"Poisoning your food."
Burning down your house. Joseph lit a cigarette. So why didn't you? Anthony looked at him, really looked, because I realized...
"You already did it to yourself." Joseph blinked. "You're not a man."
Not anymore.
"You're a statue in a graveyard no one visits." Joseph nodded slowly. "And why are you here?"
Anthony looked down at the coffee, now cold between them. I just needed to say it, out loud, to your face, and see if it changed anything in me, Joseph asked. Did it? Anthony stood. No. He walked to the door, paused, and said one last thing without turning around. I hope when you go...
You remember the faces, not the power. Then he was gone. Joseph sat in the booth for nearly an hour, didn't order anything else, didn't finish his cigarette, just listened to the city again, this time, not waiting for death, just inviting it. The next few weeks passed like whispers. Leo sent a postcard from Chicago.
Said he was working construction.
Said, "Thanks for the truth. I'm making mine now." Ryan Marchese sent a package with a photo of him and his new baby daughter. No return address. Just one sentence scribbled on the back. "You saved her?" 2. Joseph kept both on the fridge. Then one morning, Carmela came by and found him asleep at the kitchen table, except he wasn't sleeping. His coffee was still warm, a pen in his hand.
A notepad with only one sentence written at the top. I remembered every one of them. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just touched his shoulder,
Kissed his forehead and whispered, "You earned it." The paper ran no headline, just a few lines in the obituary section. Joseph Ida, age unknown, passed away quietly in his South Philadelphia apartment.
no known relatives.
No services planned. Former business owner, but the city knew, the streets remembered. That night, candles flickered in certain windows. Older men sat on stoops in silence. One or two even poured a glass and drank to the quiet. Because Joseph Ida wasn't a gangster. Not at the end. He was a man who stayed, who saw every sin he made, and tried, in the final moments, to weigh them with something close to redemption. And in that cold apartment, under the hum of an old refrigerator, the quiet Don finally slept. And this time, he didn't dream.